Hey everyone, I got something new today. I've purchased a DRO for my mill. Now I wasn't going to do this so soon, but as it turns out, using a mill is a lot harder than using a lathe without one. And so a couple of months ago I jumped in, I did all the research and decided what I needed to buy. I placed an order and I did not buy the cheapest DRO on Banggood or AliExpress as so many of the others tend to do on these videos. I actually bought quite a nice DRO off eBay. And so this will be a multi-part series. The latter parts are going to be the installation, but in this first part I'm just going to have a look at the scales. I'll talk about why I bought those. We'll have a look at the DRO unit. I'm going to plug it in, turn it on, flip through the menus, just have a little look at it. And then we're going to come back to the mill, take the scales, take some of this mounting hardware that I've purchased, and we'll poke around and see how it might all be mounted, because that's the big question. How are you going to mount them? After that, I will take a couple of the scales, go to my mini lathe, and just see how the scales would fit on that, because who knows, maybe later on I'll get a DRO for the lathe, and it'd be nice to know now if the same sort of scales would fit on that. So if you want to see any of this, stick around and watch the video. Alright, these are the scales that I've purchased. I've got two more on the side, but they're much longer, so they're not in the frame here. These are what are called magnetic scales. Now, if you go looking at people's videos about this kind of topic, you'll find most people use glass scales. Once I figured out that there was this thing called a magnetic scale, and I could see how much more compact it was and easier to install, I knew straight away that's what I wanted. Now, they are usually more expensive, and certainly if you're buying a name brand, this is a Ditron DMA2, they do cost more. But on top of that, I also wanted them to be accurate. With that in mind, I decided to go for the 1 micron scales rather than the 5 micron. Most people go for 5. Funnily enough, it wasn't that much more expensive either. It wasn't like twice the price. It was another 10% or something. But of course, it also takes a different read head. And so this is the Ditron DMR 2000 1 micron read head. And so these are quite nice. It's got this LED on the back. If it's red, it's not reading. If it's green, it is reading, which helps with setup. So basically, you set it all up. If it's green over the distance, it's good. If it's red, fix it. There's not really anything on them. As you can see, there's no openings where stuff can get in. It's all just a closed box. Another benefit with the magnetic scales is you can cut them much more easily than the glass scales. People do cut the glass ones, but what they are doing is actually cracking the glass. They're trying to score it with like a Dremel cutting disc or something, and then just basically crack it and hope that it cracks off evenly. These ones, you basically cut them. Unscrew the end bit, you take out the steel thing, you cut that with your scissors, and then the rest of it you just put it on your bandsaw and you just cut it. What else is there? Oh yes, this little block at each end is really nice. It's got 5 little set screws in there. You can take this thing, put it on your column, and if your column is not dead square with the rest of your mill, say the casting is a little bit like that, which mine is, you can just use those screws to compensate for that. You don't need another plate or another box or some kind of angled block or anything. You can just mount that on the side column, screw it in, and then use those screws to just tilt it off like that. That's it. Real simple and easy. So when you buy these, you got to be very careful about the lengths. As an example, this here is a 150, and conveniently, because I purchased these pre-made, it actually says how much the measuring length is, 150. Well, 150 is only about that, and then there's another 60 millimeters or so on each end where it doesn't measure, and that's of course because the head doesn't reach the end, it only goes to there. So I did that with all my axes, and I was able to buy the pre-cut ones, 150, 200. I got a 300, that's for my column, and a 550 for my bed. And so there we go, I got these 4 scales, very happy with those. Alright, so that's everything I wanted to say about the scales. Let's move on to the head unit and just turn it on and see what it does. Right, that's the Ditron D80 head unit. Now, when you go looking around eBay for these things, they all sort of look the same. It's a bit difficult to figure out what does what, but because it's a name brand, I could go online and find a manual for it, a PDF, download it and read it, and that's what I did. Now, I arrived at this unit because I was specifically looking for an LCD display like this. I wanted a graphical display. I didn't want those 1970s LEDs. I mean, they're perfectly good. A lot of people use them, but you know, it's 2023. I want something that's nicer and it can show me all the bolt holes and I don't have to remember the numbers and stuff. There's a feature where I can take the Z and the U and I think sum them together. I don't know how it works, if it goes onto the Z line or what. We'll have to find out later. But that's why I have the 4-axis. So I opted for the one without the RPM because my mill does have an RPM display in it. But funnily enough, it turns up, it's got the extra input and it's got the RPM sensor with it. So bonus, I'm very happy. It's got everything that I wanted. All right, let's fire it up. Turn on the power there. There we go. It's nice and bright, certainly here inside, and my workshop is very bright, as I'm sure everyone knows. So it's nicely visible. And there we go, the 4 axes, X, Y, Z, and U. And there's the RPM counter right there. Now, I don't really know what I can show you here. We'll just flip through a few things. These function buttons here operate those icons, so whatever's there, that does. So that's the settings icon. If I press that, I'm in the settings. That now says exit. Press that one, go back out again. You can also flip through extra rows of icons with this. Like there's a calculator, there's the bolt holes, all sorts of things. Another bunch of things, I don't know what they are. This has the entire user manual that I downloaded, the whole PDF. The whole thing is built into it. So that's great. Operation of the whole thing is built in. That's really cool. Nope, go there, go settings. Here we've got the compensation, linear and non-linear. The resolution I've set to 1 micron. Mill or lathe you can set it to. Oh, there's a brightness control. The RPM counter, you can choose the number of sensors. Now, I didn't want to have to pull out the RPM counter that's already in there for the mill. I can actually mount this one in there separately, and it's going to fit. There's plenty of room for it. But there's only one magnet that comes with it. However, there's a setting in here, so you can let it work with 4, which is the number of magnets that are in my mill. I've already tested it. It works with the magnets that are in the mill. Very cool. There's lots of different functions. I'm not sure, but I think you might be able to assign functions to these keys, just the default row, something like that, not sure. Funnily enough, it's got a CPU temperature there of 10 degrees centigrade, a voltage, you can restore factory settings. Version 3, I don't know if there's the ability to do a firmware upgrade. You'd think there would be. All right, so let's just quickly see it working. I'll turn it off. Flip it over, plug this into one of the axes. So this thing now has a red light, and if I put it on here, it's still red. And if I give it a little push, it turns green. And now it starts to read there. I move it, away it goes. All right, so I think that's enough playing around with the head unit. Let's go and have a look at how all this is going to fit onto the mill. Okay, now we're just going to have a look at how these might be installed. Now this column one I think is going to be the easiest, so I'm going to start with that first. The way I measured it, just if anyone wants to know, all I did was I ran the head to the top, and I drew a mark just across the head and the body right there, and then I wound it all the way back down and drew another mark. And that marks down there. And then between those two, it was like 270, something like that. 260. So 260 is the maximum amount of movement. And I purchased a 300 millimeter scale, which in fact is 420 long. So that's 300 plus 60 an end of dead space. That's 420. Plus I've got an extra 40 millimeters that I'm not going to be using. Now this could be cut down, but why would I bother? See that slot there? That's where the magnetic tape goes. If you buy the Optimum branded DRO, you just stick it in there and you're done. How easy is that? But in this case, the same sort of tape is inside this channel. So let's put that there. One option would be to mount it right up close to the edge, over where that tape is, but I don't think that needs to happen. I'm going to mount it further back on the column, and then use those little set screws to flatten it out. Because the column very slightly tilts backwards. Not much, but there's a couple of degrees. Now, one thing I am considering is maybe putting a little aluminum plate. I could make a little square like that, size of that, and just stick it there, and then put that on there, and I could adjust the screws against that rather than against the paint. However, I would of course need to drill through, because that center hole is what really holds it all, so I would need to drill. Am I going to drill? I don't know. I could, or instead of a little plate, how about I make a little block the same as that, and then I tap a hole through it like a M5 or M6 or something, and countersink it, and then put a screw in there, a countersink screw. So it's sticking out, and I'll just Loctite it in there. So it's basically a little block with a screw thread sticking out of it. I could then stick that block on the column here, and then use those screws to adjust it flat. That would work. And all I'd have is a couple of blocks stuck on it there and there. And that way I'm not drilling the column. That would be one way around that. But I can already tell that probably for the X and Y, I'm going to have to drill into each one of those castings for the head. We'll see. That said, this is probably the easiest one to drill. So the next one up is the quill. Now that's probably the hardest one. I don't know how I'm going to do this. There's a whole lot that comes into it. I want the bracket for the DRO unit to be mounted up here as well on the side, and I may also want a quill stop, so that I have a gadget that when I move this down I can adjust it so that it stops at a certain spot. I'd like to do that at the same time because it's sort of the same thing. If I make some kind of a plate that clamps around like that, and it's a plate that comes out a bit to here, to the edge, which would then allow me to mount this thing to it, and then that can go up and down with the quill, then that should also operate as a quill stop. So that should be done at the same time. I'll probably have to take the paint off this because whatever I make needs to be pretty precise and pretty tight there. So I might have to take the paint off there. I'm sure it'll come off if I just breathe on it. So if I have some sort of plate and then this is attached to that plate and the plate goes up and down, I can have the reed head like that. I could potentially even mount it that way and just mount the reed head to the body. And so again, that would go up and down like that. I wouldn't be able to see the LED. I have considered whether or not I make some kind of little trolley for the head to sit in, maybe out of acetal, something that takes the head, holds it there, and it grips the channel there and there, so it holds onto it like that. The idea there is that the head is always held at the same distance, or perhaps the track is held at the same distance from the head, because the track is only going to be attached at one end, the bottom, and then it's potentially sort of floppy. So it almost needs something to hold it. And that could be something that is part of the head, or it could be separate. It could just be something that I screw on up here, and it just holds that, regardless of where the head is. And that would then allow me to put it this way. The head could be like that. Head could be like that. Head could be like that. Something real simple. Something that also serves double duty as a quill stop, and will also let me mount this bracket for the DRO to the case there. So that's going to be sitting there as well. That's why I think what I'm going to do is make an aluminium plate to cover that whole piece there. It's going to be mounted with those two holes and those two holes. I could possibly use those two up there for it, and that would save me drilling. I can do all my drilling into that plate, so that can mount there, and whatever I do with this other, the reed head, can mount to that. I can't do it over here, it's just too messy. There's so much stuff there, there's just no room for anything. Yeah, so that'll be the hardest one to do. The next one will be X and Y. This is also going to be a bit fiddly. Obviously it needs to go down here. Again, there's a slot there for sticking the magnetic tape if you get the old style tape. If I put this in its place, that's actually all right. It would fit there. The only downside is it sort of stands up here. And so on the rear, chips will fall behind it. It's not terrible, but it's not great. So it'd be nicer if this was mounted further down so that chips can just fall off. I could shim it out, take out that little gap by putting this in, which is basically exactly the right size. And then this here can go on that, but it's not quite thick enough. It needs to be a little bit more. 2 bits of this to bring it out like that. That would allow me to do it. But at that point, I've still got this slot up here, which I'd like to cover, because I want anything to just sort of fall off and be sweepable. I don't use a lot of fluids. This thing is never drenched, so I'm not too concerned about that. I have considered having a cover, a little bit of flashing on this one, and so I've bought this thing here. This is like an L-shaped bit of extrusion. So if I mount that in there, I can use the screws again to adjust it, and it gives me just that little bit of cover. And I could do that. I guess I either need to fill up this gap with strips of aluminium flat bar like that, or if I leave a gap, then chips and stuff could just fall down behind it and I don't worry about it. But if I do that, I'd need to mount this out even further, and that way there's just a nice big gap behind it. If I do that, I was considering whether I could use the bolts down here. I would have this thing and basically a bracket that goes all the way down and attaches to each of those bolts. And that way the whole thing would sit out here like that with quite a large gap. That's another one. I wouldn't need to drill for that. So the reed head needs to be way up inside there. And it's attached up here to this piece, of course. So I'm going to need a block of some sort, some kind of L-shaped block. I could do it like that. Doesn't really matter if it's that way. You know, if stuff can fall on it, but it doesn't really matter. It's all under cover. You see, like that. Or I could do it like that. Again, with some kind of bracket. There's many ways to mount it there. I'm a little unsure on that one. And so the last one is the long one. Where's that? Here. The 550. Now this can go in 2 places. On the rear or at the front. If it's at the rear, I would use, again, this L-shaped one. So that would be sitting in there like that. And basically just go over the back. That's fine. The reed head would be sticking out the rear like that. That's okay. Another way would be mount it like that. And now the reed head could be underneath. Bit easier maybe to mount the reed head. And the difference is that if I do it like that, then the total front to rear is exactly that. If I do it the other way, then the front to rear is that plus the reed head. It's a little bit more, but not a heck of a lot. 33 or 4 versus 32. So it's almost the same. Obviously, if you don't see the reed head, that's tidier, you know, if you just have that. But now if you mount it on the back, of course, you're taken away from this, the ability of the table to go to the rear. I mean, as you can see, my vise already sticks out the back, so I'm already losing quite a lot, and so that's going to happen. But it'd be nice not to lose that. So the alternative is to mount it here on the front. And again, I could use this, mount it there, and do the same thing. Have the reed head sitting down here. I could use those holes. The reed head would just point upwards. Once again, I could mount it that way, but the reed head would be pointing inwards. My only concern up front here is that it is sticking out the front, and if I lifting a rotary table on here or something, or this vise, I can easily whack it. So a little unsure. I'm not fussed about losing that scale, losing access to that, but I could actually go below that scale, especially if I mount this in this orientation. You see, I can go below that scale. I'd need to remove these things, and I'd use socket head screws in there probably, although you can get longer ones of these, but I don't really like them up front here. They're always in the way, so I might just have some socket head screws in those holes. But yeah, so that's an option like that. Sticks out a bit, but the head would be pointing upwards in that case. And it's out of the way of this, in fact. I need to consider that because the head touches the wheel. When I screw this all the way out, that comes into contact with this wheel, and so this would as well. In fact, slightly sooner. Yeah, if I had it that way, it wouldn't hit the wheel. Interested in any thoughts on that one as well? If I put it on the front, I don't think I'd need to drill any holes because I could use this T-slot to mount it, and obviously I could use the holes there. Okay, the last thing I want to look at is the lathe. Now, people obviously put glass scales in these, but it's crazy. They have a big box here sticking out. They have to take that off, and it just becomes a nightmare. So I'm hoping to be able to do something much more compact. Now again, if you get the Optimum DRO with its magnetic strips, the tape, and you put the tape in there. Now that would be the easiest by far. That really would. Again, it's not protected or anything, but that would be easy. But let's see about these here. I could look into whether or not that would... Oh, I know. Okay, I figured it out. For the lathe, I would use the Optimum supplied DRO. That's what I would do. The box that just measures distances and doesn't do bolt holes and all that. Well, there's no bolt holes on this, so why would you need it? The Optimum DRO, it uses the stick-on magnetic scales. They go into there. You don't lose anything. And there's a slot down the side here, again for that tape, and the head mounts under that. Yeah, that's the answer. I wouldn't go and purchase all these things, and I certainly wouldn't buy glass scales. But let's see, if I use these, the one down here is the easiest. That would be no problem at all. That 300 almost fits in there, just about squeezes in there. And if that were there and the head were mounted under that, yeah, that would work. One would have to cut out a little bit here. There's a piece of... Oh, that's the motor cover. Okay, the tape goes to there. Again, with the Optimum DRO, it's going to work. Because if you're sticking the magnetic tape straight to the chassis here, well, there's no dead bit. There's no dead zone that you have to add. So it actually works. It goes to the end there. The answer is obvious now. Use the Optimum branded one and use the magnetic tape that sticks on there and sticks in the back, and that provides those two axes. As for the tailstock, well, it's a 3-axis, so you could use the third. Ideally, I'd want it up here because I use this. I know other people just take these off and put a block there, but I use this. This is my precision one. I don't know how they use this for precision because it hasn't got it. This is the precision dial right here. I need to check if the Optimum will sum two of the axes or if you have to use them separately. Well, again, tape could go on the side there. There's certainly room to mount a head there. All right, again, I'm interested in if anyone's done this. What have they done? Also keen to know if anyone has that Optimum one. It's a little gray box. It's called a DRO 5, I think. All right, let's finish this video off. All right, that's a lot of food for thought. It's not going to be that simple. I think on the next video I'm going to do the Z-axis because that's the easiest by far. And then I might look at this plate that I want to install here and that bracket for the screen. And then after that we'll get on with the others. If you're going to like the video or any of my other videos, please do it now, because if you wait till the end, I've noticed that if the video moves to another video, it's too late. You know, you don't know when it's going to end, and then boom, it's gone. And who goes back to like a video? And probably no one. So if you were going to like it, please do that now. That would be much appreciated, because I think it's the likes that promote the traffic. Once the likes stop, nothing happens. The videos just die. Otherwise, give me some comments. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.